Hi, I'm Ms. Wilcox. I'm an avid teacher here at North Junior High.
And I'm Mrs. Lee, and I'm the ALM teacher at North Junior High.
We wanted to talk to you about taking Cornell notes, the why and the how, to help you become better students and better studiers.
So, the reason your teachers are wanting you to take Cornell notes is because it helps you remember things.
There's a man named Herman Ebbinghaus who lived in the 1800s, and he did a practice test with a group of people, having them memorize a list of meaningless three-letter words. And he tracked how quickly his subjects forgot the words as a way of trying to understand how the human brain works and how we remember and how we forget. And that is a really famous study. It's known as the Ebbinghaus or the forgetting curve. And it's the basis for a lot of what we understand today still about remembering.
So, here's the Ebbinghaus curve. You can see on the far left side that after 20 minutes of learning the material, you retain about 58% of it. After 1 hour, you remember 44% of it, and then it continues to decrease. So at the end of a day, you remember 33% of it. After 6 days, almost a week later, you remember a quarter of what you learned. And at the end of the month, you remember 20% of what you learned that day.
You can see how this would be a problem if you're learning something in class that you need to remember a couple of weeks later for a test. You need to go back and relearn all of that information before you take the test. So if we look at what Ebbinghaus figured out, the forgetting curve starts at about 90% if we could remember everything after a lecture. Really, we only remember about 75% at the end of a lecture, so we don't even start as high on the scale. But you have the potential to forget less and remember more if you review right away after class. So before you walk out of the room, if you were to look at your notes with a partner and spend a couple of minutes processing, if you were to write a summary in your study time that day, or right away when you get home from school that afternoon, if you were to look over your notes, you could actually increase the amount that you understand about the notes right away.
So here are some tips on how to overcome the curve. At the end of class, you can take a look at your notes. During study time, if you look at your notes for 10 minutes, you'll be back up to 100% of that, retaining that information. Your second review could come the following day, and that following day you could work on putting questions in the left-hand margin, rereading your notes, condensing, summarizing. Your third review could be 1 week later. So before class the following week or earlier, you can review and do a self-test. Cover up your Cornell notes and read the questions in the left-hand column.
None of these reviews should take more than about 10 minutes. This isn't something that's going to take you hours and hours to do. But if you sit down with your notebook and you make yourself review for 10 minutes and look over your notes and quiz yourself, look at how much more information you remember and how much less studying you're going to need to do before that big test.
So if you study 10 minutes multiple times, 4 times during that month, you'll be more prepared and ready for taking that test.
I'll tell you that students who try this, who trust us and try it, often come back completely shocked and say, oh, it really worked. Like I actually remembered it, as if it's this really shocking, surprising thing. And the reality is, it's just how our brains work. It will work for everyone. It always works because it's how our brains learn. So remember, if you review the same day as you take the notes, whether that's in class with a partner before you walk out, right after class, in your study time, or right away when you get home from school that day, that's your first review. Second review, the next day, remember you can sit down and reread your notes You can create questions in the left-hand column, and that's going to help you retain that information. Then a week later, again, if you just cover up your notes and quiz yourself for a few minutes, that's your third review, and now you own that information. And when you prepare to study for your midterms and your finals, you've already reviewed the material 3 times. It's going to be a really quick study session rather than relearning everything the way you'd have to do if you'd never looked back at those notes. This is just a reminder about how to set up a page of Cornell note paper. If you've got a normal piece of loose leaf paper or a notebook, all you need to do is draw yourself a margin on the left-hand side about 2.5 inches in. Make a header at the top with your name, the class, the period, and the date. Write the topic, whatever it is that you're talking about in class that day, and if you've got an essential question or a big question, that can go on the top as well. And then you take your notes in the class notes section. After class, and this is the part where if it's during class and your teacher gives you time to do this with a partner before you walk out, or in study time or after school, that's when you put in those questions, the subtitles, the heading. This is your first review of your notes. And then when you get to the bottom of a page or a whole section of notes, you're going to write a summary across the bottom. That's it. That's as simple as it is to set up a page of Cornell notes.
Here are some examples. So if your teacher has a diagram up on the board, you can just copy that diagram.
And then after class, you can come up with questions that would help you. These might be questions that would show up on a quiz or a test about these notes. And you can see that you could cover up the diagram, ask yourself those questions on the left-hand side, and get a pretty good sense of whether you understand the information.
So note-taking can be, like we just saw, a diagram. It can be in an outline format. It can be a paragraph. It can be shorthand, abbreviations. It can be symbols. And all of those notes are taken in that big, large right-hand column.
The kinds of questions you write in the left-hand column should ask questions like information you don't understand or want to discuss with your teacher. So if you're looking at your notes and there's something confusing to you, write that in that left-hand column. If you can think of a question, or if a teacher says, hey, this is going to be on the test, make sure that you star that, and then after class, write a question about it in that left-hand column that's going to help you study. The other thing to do is if you had to leave to use the bathroom or the teacher went so quickly that you missed something, if you notice that there's a gap in your notes, make a note of that in that left-hand column so you can follow up with a friend from the class or with your teacher after class or from their Moodle page to fill in that gap.
Here are some more examples. This is from a 9th grade biology class. Notice they've got a kind of an outline or bullet point notes on the right-hand side. They've got vocabulary words on the left-hand side, and then the summary is on the bottom.
This is a sample of physics notes from college, and it's good to remember that these kind of notes can carry you through studying for the rest of your career as a student. But you can see how there are drawn diagrams and there are formulas. So note-taking looks however you need it to look. But then you can see that they've numbered questions in that column on the left, and it would be really easy for them to cover up that right-hand side and give themselves a really good quiz to prepare for the test.
And here's the summary for those notes. So a nice paragraph summary, but the summary here also includes graphs, some visual symbols to help them remember.
So often students will say to me that they don't really know how to study, and Cornell Notes is the key. This is going to help you study well. So make use of the format. You can cover up, as we've been talking about, that right side of your notes and then review and answer study questions from the left. I often do this with my own children. They'll just hand me their notebook and I can read them the questions from the left-hand side and I can check to see if they understand the information by looking at their notes on the right.
You can quiz yourself out loud, reading. You can cover up the right side with a blank piece of paper and then write out your answers on the left to the left-hand column to help you study.
Writing, as we know, is one of the keys to remembering. And so writing summaries of the material in your summary and reflection section is a great way to check with yourself whether you truly understand the notes. I can't tell you the number of students I've worked with who say, I studied for 3 or 4 hours for that test and I still failed. And I'll ask them, well, did you understand what was in the notes? No, not really. It doesn't matter how many hours you spend looking at your notes if you don't understand them. So trying to write a summary is a great way to make sure that you really understand what your notes are about.
You could write a quiz for somebody else using your notes. What do you think? Make a prediction of what you think will be on that quiz and write your quiz. You could exchange it with a partner and correct.
And as Mrs. Lee said, writing test questions that you think might be on the test beyond those that are already in your left-hand column, and then writing the answers down is a great way to study for a test. We know that reviewing your information, looking over your notes frequently to keep the information and the questions fresh in your mind is the best way to learn it and remember it. And the secret and special information is it takes less time. It takes a lot less time to remember for review for 10 minutes than it does to relearn everything for hours the night before a test.
You can recite information from your notes. So like recall.
And we also know that studying in groups is the best way as a student to prepare yourself for information and to be ready for class. So exchanging notes with other people, you'll notice what they wrote down that you missed. They may have examples that you didn't have. They'll have questions you hadn't thought of. So it's a great way to make your learning go deeper and broader.
You can use notes in study groups to provide a common ground of material for you to review, and this could be done during study time.
And sometimes students will look at their notes and realize that actually rewriting their notes is the best way for them to learn them again, to learn that material, to clean it up a little bit, to make sure they have all the information there that they need in a format that really helps them study. So don't be afraid to spend 10 minutes rewriting your notes as a way of studying for something. And we want to thank the wonderful people who put together the information in this presentation. Mrs. Lee and I are always available to answer questions about Cornell Notes, but we hope this gives you a better sense of why all of your teachers are asking you to take notes in this style. And we hope you'll all use notes this year to help you study and remember so that you can move on in school really ready to learn.